According to the OECD's Program for International Student Assessment, which is released every 3 years, Korea is first in the world in relative performance in problem solving. The college entrance rate of Korea is over 70%, which is also in the upper ranks globally. U.S. President Barack Obama and even the U.S. Secretary of Education have spoken highly about Korea's education system. However, the foreign media latched on to the unique circumstances surrounding test-taking day in Korea. The Korean education system is sometimes criticized as being too restraining, as it focuses so heavily on entrance exams. There are areas of light and areas of darkness within Korean education. Can we say Korea has an advanced education system?
Hello and welcome to another edition of Upfront. I'm Na-hyun Kyung.
Hello, I'm Yoo Jung-soo. On today's Upfront, we take a closer look at Korea's education system.
To help us navigate through today's topic, we have two experts in the studio. First, Professor Emerita Lee In-ho at Seoul National University, and Chair Professor at Hanyang University, Professor Lee Hyun-chung. Pleasure to have you both on the program.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Happy to be here too.
Well, today we are going to start with a simple, straightforward question. So, is it safe to say that Korea has an advanced education system?
An advanced system? I would say not.
And why is that?
Because I think by comparison with the high level of college attendance, we do not have a system which is attentive to the individual needs of individual students.
And Professor Lee, do you have a different opinion or?
Almost same opinion, but a little different opinion because we have a advanced educational system some part, but structure-wise, there's some critical issues, I think.
Korea has the highest college entrance rate in the world. Do you think the nation's high education fever can lead to national happiness?
Well, education fever in itself, I think, is a salutary phenomenon, but how it is channeled depends on how the education system is run, and we're not doing very well there.
Could you give us some examples of how it's failing in that aspect?
For instance, I think there's something I sometimes refer to as education inflation. Too many people want to go to the university and then after graduation find themselves almost useless. In terms of formal degrees and so forth, they are overeducated. But they are thrown into jobs that perhaps could be handled by well-educated high school graduates. This is the sort of thing that I'm concerned about.
What's your opinion on this?
I have a little different opinion, sorry about that. But we have a highest college entrance rate in the world. Last year, maybe about 73% out of high school graduates go into the universities. In previous years, 5 years, 82 or 83% were the top. That brought a lot of educational issues in this country, for example. And the other side, for example, OECD survey said that the value of diploma, a bachelor diploma, is a satisfactory level in the world top in Korean student, 63%. That is some bright side of it, but the shadow side of it, that brought a lot of private tutoring, private education. That's issues. So a little different opinion, I think.
So I don't think we really differ. Perhaps the way I explained it is a little different. For instance, we are very much concerned about the proliferation of private education, simply because it's so costly and in many ways uneducational. But I do not think it's because of the educational zeal. It is because the type of individualized attention and education that people seek and people are now capable of paying for is not available. So this is why they just look for private solutions. And so long as the population is not given wide choice in terms of the type of schools they want to attend and the kind of style of education they seek, I don't think there's a way of stamping out this phenomenon of private lessons and so forth.
So do you think there needs to be a wider variety of choices for students and parents to choose from in terms of the different kinds of schools, perhaps?
I think so, and basically I feel that much of the country's education problems stem from the fact that there's a sort of a top-heavy bureaucracy which does not encourage ideas from below to be thrown into the education system. It's a very sort of highly regimented system. The so-called private schools also have to pay attention to whatever the ministry or the school boards force them to do. And I do feel that what the Korean people and the government should realize at this point is that there's no way to well, suppress the education, zeal for education, and also the economic capability to go out seeking for the best education available in the world. So it's the heavy sort of regulated system that is producing these undesirable phenomena.
So regulation needs to be deregulated.
Yes.
Yes, I think so. I agree with that part. I think so. We have to back to the what's the definition of advanced educational system. We have to discuss that first, because we have to educational system is advanced educational system need function well, also doing well and learn well schools in terms of the three components. For example, we have a major four functions. For example, cultural transmission and reproduction for the next generation. The other one, socialization, which means civic education and the sound characteristic development of individual student. And the other one, selection and allocation for the student. That related to the entrance examination and the curriculum and the process of education. If do well those three functions, then finally education function is devoted to the national development, innovation, and development. If they doing not well those functions, that's not a good or well-organized advanced educational system at all. So Professor Lee mentioned about that. It's education deal not affect the private children in private education. I have some different opinion on that. For example, educational deal itself is not bad one. It's not condemned one and not criticized its concept at all. But that educational deal may contribute the educational disease, my terms, on the whole society. That's a problem. For example, college entrance rate very high. That is good. But that side effect of college entrance rate very high brought, for example, private tutoring, prerequisite learning, and all suffering from those kind of expenses, costly, the parent and the teachers and all stakeholders of education. That's a problem. That's my view.
And it's also the cultural factor. I mean, as Koreans, we feel like we haven't done enough if you don't get into a college. For instance, if you fail for the first year, then your parents are worried about you and you are worried about your life. So that concept, could that perhaps also be triggering this phenomenon in a way?
Well, certainly cultural factors and I guess the nature of political culture we have very serious impact on education system. To put it shortly, that's this preoccupation with the notion of equality. I think that is what has stopped us from really looking into education for the best possible effect that we can have. How to get superior results in achievement. At the same time, how to vouch for equal opportunity. And many people think that the nation should be responsible not for vouching, safeguarding the equal opportunity, not stop there, but also should be concerned about the results. And what should be done through, say, welfare program is often imposed upon the education schooling system, and there's enormous confusion. So, for instance, in our entrance examination, the examiners are not allowed to ask questions based on information, knowledge, not specifically mentioned in the textbooks. I think that
anything outside of the textbooks?
No, nothing is allowed. So a person, a student who is really creative and wants to really forge ahead of others, explore on his own, that sort of person is discouraged because he has no way of proving his special talent.
Right.
So this is very counter-effective, and as a result, sort of educational black market has developed.
Nonetheless, I mean, U.S. President Barack Obama speaks highly of Korean way of educating our students. So what would be some of the merits from a foreign country's perspective? What would be some of the merits of Korea's education system?
Yeah, that's a very critical question. There is both sides. Obama is highly spoken about the Korean education, especially advanced Korean education system, at his State of the Union address. Also, a couple of times he mentioned about admire Korean education. He mentioned a couple of reasons for that. First one is school days is longer than that of the United States. I mean, learning hours are longer than, and the Korean education system, more competitive system compared to the US system. Also, parents' involvement in learning is more higher than that of US parents. They do. And also the other one is teaching method, learning method are a little different. Teacher initiated learning. That's he admired that part. But those identifying factors, he admired Korean educational system. There is a very critical issue too. Internally, we insightfully we look into in our educational system. There is some issues there too. But other countries, for example, OECD countries, one survey say that Korea is the education king in the classroom. They say that, the topic of it. For example, even OECD countries call Korea as a country of educational miracle, because there's 4 reasons I later discuss about that. But every other country, foreign countries, they admire the Korean educational system and also good achievement. Those reasons.
It's interesting that Professor Ino, you mentioned that the Korean education has certainly the absence of the attending individual talent. So that student has a special talent, but the education system does not really pay attention on that or nurture that. So how can we improve that part? It seems that we have a good system in terms of the structure-wise. Then how can we improve in that aspect of education?
I do feel that the government, or central or local, both, should concentrate on building, say, public education system to provide the minimum level of education that is available to everyone. So that's to be done, of course, with the taxpayers' money. But if there are people who are not satisfied with public education system, they should be allowed to develop the kind of schools that they would like to. For instance, they are slow learners or people who have talents in non-academic areas. There should be schools. Also, some people would prefer some slight religious input. And I think that should also be allowed. But we do not do that. This so-called independent private schools, this is of course oxymoron, and private schools should be independent, but we have this autonomous private schools, and that right now the hot debate is whether some of those schools should be outlawed or not. And that's ridiculous in my mind. So if the Ministry of Education concentrated on developing public schools with the resources available from taxpayers, then the quality of the education in those schools would improve. So I hope vast majority of the Korean people will not have to go to private schools or hire private tutors. But because the public schools are not meeting their needs, they are seeking their own resources. But we have, over the decades, tried various measures to stamp out private education. But we have a system, it's a liberal democratic system. People can do whatever they want to with the money they earn. And in the priority of values that Koreans have, educating your children is #1 priority. So there's no way you can stop parents from spending money for the children's education. But our official system does not allow that. So my argument is that if the government would just allow private schools to develop and leave it in a way to the market forces, those who do a good job will survive and become good schools, and the others will die out. The main political concern there, of course, is only kids with rich parents can attend these schools.
Right.
But I don't think that is really sort of a needed conclusion. The government can subsidize the education by giving scholarship grants to whoever can make it, but not interfere in how these schools recruit students by what method. I think the what the ministry should do is to set up some standards. In order to get a high school diploma, you should meet certain level of requirements in math or Korean language or history or whatever. But how you do it should be left to the educators.
And today, as usual, we are going to talk to a few experts from outside of the studio. First up is Mr. Seth Andrew. He is the founder of Democracy Prep Public Schools. Thank you very much for joining us, and Mr. Andrew. So what did you see in Korea's education system that made you take that system to the States?
So what I loved about the Korean system when I taught at Dongsung Middle School was, #1, a respect for teachers. What I mean by respect for teachers is the ideas of insa, even the title Sansangnim, meaning that our teachers were honored people. That is something that was missing in America, was this respect for the profession of teachers. The second thing I saw in Korea was that all of the families I met, whether they were rich or poor, they believed that education was the most important value. They believed that education was the path to success, the path out of poverty. It was what lifted the Korean nation up after the Korean War, was education. And so I saw that in the Korean culture, and I wanted to bring that back to Harlem. And the third thing I saw was this deep, deep sense of hard work, and that every student I met worked incredibly hard. They went to school long hours, they went to Hagwon, they did their homework, they demonstrated an incredible amount of effort. So even if they weren't where they wanted to be yet, they believed that the harder they worked, the more successful they would be. So those three things: respect for teachers, a sense that education is the most important value, and a sense that hard work equals success, are what I wanted to bring back to Harlem and to Democracy Prep.
Please introduce us the Korean-style education system that your school are employing. What have been the responses from the students and the parents?
So Democracy Prep has used not a Korean model, but a hybrid model. And so when I say hybrid, I mean it takes the best of the Korean system and the best of the American system, and it puts them together. So it's not just one or the other, it's really the best of both worlds. So what I did at Democracy Prep was I took elements of the Korean system. We have a much longer school day. We have a great deal of respect for our teachers. We pay our teachers very well. We treat them very well. And we tried to build this culture of respect and hard work that I saw in Korea. And then I wanted our students to also have the experience of the Korean culture. So we started to teach Korean language as our mandatory foreign language. So that means every student at Democracy Prep speaks Korean as their only foreign language. It also means that they have opportunities for Korean cultural activities, such as samonori and taekwondo, and they do Korean dancing and performances. And all of those pieces come together to give our students in Harlem, who are exclusively Black and Latino, a very different exposure to the world than they've had in the past.
So do you have any plans to work further with Korea or Korean schools for that matter?
So it's a great question. I'm actually very excited to continue to cooperate and participate in the Korean education system and the American education system so we can do that hybrid model. For the past year, I've been working most of my time with Secretary Arne Duncan, who is the American Secretary of Education. And after I came back from Korea most recently for the inauguration of President Park and had met with the Secretary of Education in Korea, I started working with Secretary Duncan to help to expand and spread some of the ideas from Democracy Prep and from Korea to the whole country, not just to a few schools in Harlem, but really to the whole country. So the first thing I've done is to try to share some of what I've learned with the country in America. And now what I'm looking to do when I finish up my time with the president and with the secretary is to actually spend some more time coming to Korea to see the parts of the Korean system now that need fixing itself. So the Korean system is not perfect. It has a lot of flaws now. There's over-testing and a hyper-competitiveness and a sense of materialism. And so I really hope to be able to work with the Korean government and the Korean people to take the best parts of the Democracy Prep model and bring that back to Korea. So we continue to have this back and forth of best practices. Not that one thing is better than another, but that we need to be sharing all of those ideas with one another.
All right, thank you, sir, for your time today. That was Mr. Seth Andrew, founder of Democracy Prep Public Schools in New York.
It is important to maintain strengths and address weakness when we are promoting the growth of Korean education system. What country can we look at as being a role model for Korean education system?
The main difference I felt between the American system and the Korean system early on was that there the competition is really against yourself. How well you are doing in terms of your potential. But in Korea, for some reason, we are always thinking of competing with others.
I think we have to learn from Israel and Finland, which is where she is ambassador to work there, and the United States, in my experience, where I studied and taught there. So there is a common characteristics of those countries we have to learn. First one is the teaching method is different, very different. Not a teacher-initiated teaching. That's a learner-centered teaching method. They use it.
In all three countries?
Yes, or all those countries.
Israel, the U.S.,
yes,
and
those countries.
and Finland.
Of course, there is some combined, but it's more lean to learner-centered learning methodology they do. Also, they have very individualized learning package. They use it. Or their goal of education in order to upgrade the public schools. They identify three different philosophies. First one, excellence in education, and accountability in education, autonomy in education. Of course, European countries are really different because they are all national initiated colleges, schools there, system, a little different. But their common characteristic is teaching methodology different, and the goal setting, education of goal setting is different. Also, teachers' training program is different. Also, curriculum is different. I would like to mention about curriculum a little bit. Curriculum, for example, low level of students, they go to the most of their time spent in the field trip and the participatory learning approaches, self-help learning approaches. Also, they provide a good counseling service system. That is, we have to learn those countries. Also, in addition to one more thing, Israel and Finland and the United States, through the history education, they build up their identity education, national identity education. That is, we have to learn from those countries.
All right, well, for additional analysis of things, we have a global educational expert joining us, Dr. Chester Finn, Senior Fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, Korea's education system is being praised globally, but Korean parents here in Korea still wish to send their kids overseas for education if circumstances allow. So what's going on here, in your opinion?
Why do Korean parents want to send their kids to the United States? Well, to be candid, Korea's higher education system is not as praiseworthy yet as its primary and secondary education system. And the United States, by most measures, continues to have a great many of the world's leading universities. Moreover, the English language has become pretty much the language of the world at the advanced level. And it's important for young Koreans who want to be big successes in the broader world, not just in Korean society, to be fluent in English. So that's an additional consideration. But one of the things that we're proud of in American higher education, though there's things about it I'm critical of too, but one of the things we're proud of is that it's appealing to people from other countries who want their children to get a very good college or postgraduate education.
What kind of direction do you think the Korean education system should take?
And one of the things that I've observed in general between the U.S. education system and many Asian education systems, not just Korea. This would apply to Japan, this would apply to Singapore, this would apply to Taiwan, maybe to China if we really knew the truth about China. But basically, these Asian systems have done very well at boosting almost all kids to a high basic level of education. And we envy that. What I believe many Asian educators and parents envy in the Western system, the American system, is the level of creativity and original thinking and independence that we tend to build in to young people in this country. I'm a particular fan in the Republic of Korea of some of the special high schools that emphasize science and math. And had the opportunity to visit a couple of them myself, and am particularly interested in the education of gifted or high ability students. And some of the examples that I saw at the secondary level in Korea were really very impressive. So I learned a lot from this opportunity and look forward to having more such opportunities. And thanks for today's opportunity.
All right, thank you, sir, for your time today and answering our questions. That was Dr. Chester Finn, Senior Fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution.
Do you think it is right to regulate the private education? If so, what extent?
Oh, that's government MOE, Minister of Education, last year. They implemented a new one regulation. For example, there is a ranking system to the absolute scoring system, even though they're not effective at all. So law can control the private education not effective at all, because unless parents' belief system, parents' educational culture, or belief system or attitude change.
So it's really the bottom line is, how do we change the people? How do we change the parents and the perception that they have? That's the million-dollar question, it
well,
seems
actually,
like.
you know, I disagree slightly with what Professor Lee said. For instance, changing culture is not something that you can do overnight. You cannot expect it to change by itself. through certain systems, you can induce the population to give up certain, say, unreasonable expectations and follow the rule. For instance, I feel that you have to consider the fact that everyone wants the best possible education for her or his children. Mm-hmm. And also every college or every high school wants to get the best or the top students. So how you combine this? And there should be some sense of fairness that people can perceive in the system. But as Professor Lee said, we have tried these systems, but none of them really took seriously into consideration the cultural values that people had. So they were trying to force certain results. As a result, they failed. So what I advocated is that if you want to have educational effect achieved through entrance examination, so that certainly is one of the purposes. The other is also to guarantee equal opportunity, fair opportunity, that is.
I think there is two European countries she mentioned. There's a two-track system. In other words, sorting earlier, they go ongoing college or not. Our system is a single system that very similar to the U.S. system. That's why it's examined how it's spread out all over the world. The solution for this kind of a problem, there is a not easy job at all, not the easy agenda at all. It takes time. For example, German, they never changed college entrance exam system 100 years period of time. We, 50-year period of time, 35 times. So sorting system cannot solve this problem. That's why I pay emphasis on culture itself must change. Eventually take time. For example, we provide equal opportunity for students, everyone, legally or process-wise, but learning package must be differentiated. There's different tracks in terms of their potentials, develop their potentials, their own hidden potentials on the different tracks and their characteristics or their trait. We have to do that. Individualized learning package must be implemented, then more effective. One more thing, nature of Korean SAT must be changed. I think must be changed. For example, if the score of Korean SAT score is a admission criteria or just a minimum requirement of high school achievement, either one have to select it. There's some solution, I think.
So what about competition? Professor Lee mentioned that competition needs to be there in order to have a good education system, but do you believe competition must is necessary?
But the equalization also combined both very wisely, because there's very critical issues between the conservatives and the liberal lean in the education community. But education must be educative solutions. Education must be education itself rather than ideological perspective. That's why a competitive environment for the maybe developing some kind of elite group, but somehow slow learners, we have to take care of that by educational welfare policies, I think. Let's combine those things.
All right, so I think it's about time that we listen to the students themselves. We were able to get a hold of a group of high school students, so let's take a look at what's occupying their minds and how they think about the Korean education system.
Jill, I had such a busy summer. It's so nice to come back to school. Don't you think it's better to be back to school?
Well, I actually really enjoyed my summer. I had a lot of time to relax and do activities that I like debate. So I'm kind of sad to be returning to school, actually.
Like, I was spending a totally different vacation from you. I was stuck up with SAT work, and it was really rigorous, so I really wanted to come back to school.
Since I'm a senior, I see all of my friends preparing for Korean SAT, which is also called Suneung, and seeing all of those, I could actually feel that there are a lot of problems with the Korean college admission system because it makes students just study for Suneung all day long. So, how would you like to change the Korean college admission system, Taeyeon?
I feel like the current college admission system focuses too much on the scores rather than the student himself or herself. I think maybe colleges should look more into what this student chose, how the student chose to spend his or her time, and what the student is interested in. And I think those are more important factors than, say, scores or GPA.
Now we are just talking to each other, so we can't really have a lot of chances to directly talk to adults or our parents even, like about the education policies. So what would you like to tell the adults or the parents?
I think that what I like to tell the adults is that simply pressuring students to study long hours is not a good policy. If you compare the education system of Finland and Korea, the surprising thing is that Finland and Korean students, they have very similar academic records in terms of academic achievement. They always, top the chart. However, the problem is that Korean students on average spend 12 hours per day studying, while Finnish students, they study the fewest hours in the developed world. So if you compare the education system of both countries, you'll realize that simply studying a lot of hours is not always the most effective method in producing results. So I think that's what I'd like to tell parents the most.
I agree. Then if we also have the power to become the head of the Ministry of Education, what kind of policies would you like to make or reform, or how would you like to reform the Korean education system?
I think I'd like to lessen the core curriculum a little bit and personalize the entire school curriculum, like add in elective courses that students can take, like photography or design or these things that schools don't really teach you nowadays, right? So if you actually take lessons in those areas, you can know which areas you're talented in or want to study further on in college. I think it'll be better for basically everyone, including the students, the parents, and the government.
I also agree with Jiyoung, and I think that we should have a more hands-on approach to education because we don't really have a lot of lab experiments, we don't have group proposals or projects, and I think all the education is just really focused on root memorization and problem solving. So it would be nice if we could have more independent and hands-on approach to our own subjects. Do you have anything to add?
Lesser school hours.
Lesser school. No yaja, maybe?
And maybe make yaja a little freer. Like you can actually do things that you want during yaja. After all, it's called like free studying period, right? So maybe if you want to play sports, go outside. If you want to draw a picture, draw a picture. Make it more free for students.
Well, I must say first, I'm just very impressed at how well they speak English. I will probably have to let our viewers know that that won't be the average Korean classroom.
Right. That was just what I was thinking.
Yes, exactly. But nonetheless, I mean, what do you think? What do you think about how students are, some of their thoughts, and they were saying they want to change, they want some changes in the college admission system. So any ideas or thoughts?
I think it's, unfortunately, I think it's that students really concerned about the common issues of education that we discuss here today. I think the same thing, they're talking about academic achievement and the college admission standard, and their difficulty in school life, those kind of things. So I think it's college admission system must be changed, I think. Simpler is better, seems to me. It's so complicated these days. So complicated, so many criteria, so many preparations. That's one major cause of private education. Also, student and the parent really is suffering from college admission system. So we change it many times, not effect, very limited effect, even though we have ongoing agenda to be changed, I think. Also, student must be more free from the suffering from academic achievement. One survey showed that when they talk with the parents, 48% of theme of the topic is about the school achievement, school activities, not the discipline, not how to live, how to survive, how to be a good character of human being. Those kind of, they never say that. So I learned from those student group discussions.
It was interesting that one student mentioned that she was happy coming back from school vacation, summer vacation. She was doing so much studying during summer vacation.
Right.
So what was interesting.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that it really shows what we said earlier, how private lessons can explain the high achievement scores that Korean students are reputed to have. So in a way, the school system is failing because many students just come to their regular school class to sleep and then go to these private lessons afterwards.
Well, in the last provincial election in June, the high number of liberal education superintendents were elected.
Right, right. And they are bringing about a number of changes, including abolishing private school, high school system, as well as having students go to classes later at 9 a.m. instead of 7 or 8 a.m. So what do you make of those changes?
I think there's some concerns because previously certain school provincial school superintendent was conservatives. So they have implemented conservative leaned policies. They abolish those policies, they start again. Education not be a kind of a try and error kind of policy implementation needed. It's not good because we cultivate human being. We is to teach and the next generation. That's a really concern. Liberal leaned superintendent elected the last election, 13th nationwide. So only 5 conservatives. So we have a relatively conservative lean Minister of Education just in his position a couple of weeks ago, I think. So there is a big conflict if they say in terms of policy implementation, there's really a big concern, especially left-leaned professors, superintendents, really implement new policies such as innovative school system. They're trying to abolish private independent schools, autonomous schools, whatever. So that is chaos, some part, if they implemented it. Because any policy must be a consistency and also flexibility at the same time.
So are you saying that the idea itself is a problem, or the way that there's a conflict, or the conflict between the minister and the liberal superintendents versus the conservative minister?
A couple of concerns. For example, between the government, the conflict between the government policy and the liberal lean the superintendent policy. That's one problem. Also, students victimize the student parents if they abolish the new school systems just introduced 2 years, 3 years ago. For example, they abolish it. Who responsible for that? Those problems. Third one, I think, educational policy, not be, I already mentioned, ideological, lean kind of a policy. Not. Because education must be educative policy.
I mean,
must be education itself.
We did have a chance to talk to one of the superintendents. That we have Superintendent Lee Jae-jung of the Gyeonggi-do Provincial Office of Education. So take a look.
High school seniors usually leave home at around 6:30 in the morning. They don't get enough sleep and they can't eat well. They can't even concentrate on studying when they arrive at school in the morning. They become exhausted after having study hall and taking private classes after school late into the night. Young students should have enough time to exercise their imaginations, which can be done in their spare time by watching movies or reading novels. But they can't afford to enjoy their own lives. I think an effective education system can be promoted by delaying the start of classes until 9 a.m.
교육에는 사실 진보 보수가 없다고 생각해요.
There are no conservatives or progressives in the educational world. Progressives try to promote challenges and alternatives, while conservatives seek for better values within the traditions. As conservatives and progressives are steeped in political thinking, I do not think it is right to divide the education system into two different sides.
추구하는 것이 보수라고는 할 수 있어서 그런데 사실 교육을 말할 때
Students did not used to be at the center of discussions about the education system. We had to go through difficulties as entrance examinations were the main focus of the discussion. In order to promote real innovation, I think it is important to change the structure of teaching and learning, which is the basis of the education system, and make both teachers and students more enthusiastic.
구조를 만들어가는 거라고 생각합니다.
So, at this point, what would be the top priority for Korea's education? Would it be consistency or flexibility?
I think it's, in conclusion, in my personal opinion, is consistency and the flexibility at the same time. Harmonize it. But for example, fundamental educational system must be consistency, need consistency. But the structure itself, for example, process of education and the learning activities and the teacher training program, etc., must be flexibilities according to the environmental change. For example, 21st century, I call 3 less school age, for example, teacher-less classroom, book-less library, campus-less school. That means rapidly changing in the methodology of teaching and the learning. And the client-centered learning paradigm is spread out all over the world. So this kind of process, structure change must be according to the flexibility. But fundamental educational system must be predictable, and we can see the future by the parents and the teachers and students. So must be consistency we needed.
So you're being greedy, you want both.
Yes.
Well, I agree that the system should be consistent and predictable. But if we have a system which is not functioning well, then of course change has to be brought in. But I think I will go back to my original point, the role definition, what the government or superintendents can do, or what just everybody can do for his or his children's education. And I think we have to recognize the fact that Koreans are at a fairly high level of education, just the society at large. And each parent has good idea about what kind of education needed for their school children. And these ideas should be allowed to come into the system. So it should be an open system. At the same time, the government should see to that there will be no one deprived of educational opportunity because of the neglect by the parents. So that's where the state or superintendents should pay their attention to. But for those who want to forge ahead and build better schools or suited for their own need, they should be given freedom.
So Korea is poor in natural resources, so its success heavily depends on human resources.
And it's not an overstatement to say that education will determine the future of Korea, but nonetheless, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of Upfront.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.